Hello YouTube, just thought I'd make a video and put my 2 cents in on the whole race debate. I think science is moving quickly on this issue and it's going to radically change things over the next 50 to 100 years. I notice on other videos that people have posted, some people are still race denying. So despite the overwhelming scientific evidence, some people are still doing this whole race doesn't exist, there's no race but the human race thing. I'm sorry guys, but there is. The arguments being used to say race doesn't exist are out of date. Science is moving quickly on this one. Human genome was mapped in 2003. We can see the differences between races, not in terms of characteristics anymore, but actually in the DNA. We can see which bits differ. We can compare the human genome to, say, chimps, our closest relative. I think we're 0.4% different in terms of working DNA. That sounds small, but it's an awful lot of instructions. And I think I read somewhere that the differences between human races was somewhere around 0.02%, which a lot less, obviously, we could have guessed that, but still different. So the theory is, back in the day, somewhere in Africa, that's where Homo sapiens started out, we went from there, spread out to different geographies with different environments, therefore different mutations accumulated according to what was advantageous in those different situations, and that's where the genetic difference comes from. Bingo. If you believe in evolution, even a little bit, you kind of have to believe in race. So race denial is mumbo jumbo land. Now we can talk about what are the differences and do they matter? Are the differences between races significant? Well, obviously they are to some extent, otherwise they wouldn't exist. They evolved in response to the specific environmental conditions, whatever situation those particular humans developed in. The extant differences, the traits in the races, are well documented. Science for that has been going on for a much longer time. You know, this is something everyone's observed for themselves. If you just go to a gym for a couple of weeks, you'll soon pick up on the differences. Here's the thing, in terms of traits, you can't really say in the abstract that one trait or characteristic is better than another. So let's just say you have a guy who's shy, careful, considered, studious, a little paranoid, triple checks everything. In a lot of situations that's not considered the best, but that is the stereotype of the engineer or computer programmer. Yeah, it's a pretty accurate stereotype. You might ask yourself, are they like that because of the job they do, or are they good at the job they do because they're like that? Maybe a bit of both. But if you're going to write software, you will need to be a bit paranoid, you know, of making mistakes. You will need to triple check everything. So the trait, whatever you think of it, useful in that situation. What about someone who's outgoing, loud, bombastic, a little bit mendacious, a spin doctor? Is that a good or bad trait? Well, they'd make a great salesperson, wouldn't they? There's actually probably a ton of jobs where they'd get on pretty well. But then again, if I'm lying on an operating table, I'm not sure someone like that would be my first choice. I'm probably going to go back to the studious, paranoid, triple checking guy. So there's no real right or wrong with these things. They're just advantageous in different situations. The reason I make that point is because I've seen a tendency for people to make the measure with respect to themselves. So a guy who's athletic measures up other people in terms of their athletic ability. And if you spend time with people in Mensa, you get the impression that IQ is the measure of men. No doubt, artists are all about art, and musicians value singing and performing, and so on. So there's a temptation to look at ourselves, see what we're good at, and then insist that everyone else gets measured by that yardstick. But there is no objective yardstick. There are objective IQ scores, there are objective running times, but there's no reason why either of those, or anything, should be considered definitively good, apart from in a situation that demands that particular kind of performance. Yeah? So a particular trait is of value only with respect to the situation. Now, I understand why people downplay race. When we first started measuring up the extant differences in humans, it gave racial nationalism a boost. No doubt there were always people with a strong them and us kind of mindset, but it put the whole ideology on a much stronger footing, which led to all manner of nastiness and meanness to other people. And I guess the lesson there is, if there's a conflict between what you think science is telling you to do and morality, go with morality. Because the knowledge that they were acting on was partial. Judgments were made, actions were taken before the complete picture was understood. I actually think the science that began by measuring differences and amplifying the importance in racial differences will end up killing it. Yeah? Genetic engineering is going to kill racial nationalism stone dead. Now, as an aside, I know a lot of theists are against genetic engineering. It's the old playing God argument. We shouldn't tamper with that stuff. But I'm in favour of it. We need to look at what we are. We need to keep looking until we understand. Can't remember who it was. Possibly Carl Sagan. That whole science is a light in the darkness. A candle. Science is a candle in the darkness because it reveals, it shows us the reality of the situation, and that can only be a good thing. So our bodies, the extant organism, what they call the phenotype, is constructed according to instructions. The genotype, the code, not dissimilar to computer code. It's a definitive program. There's a bit in that program for your height and weight, nutrition depending, obviously, your eye colour, hair colour, brain chemistry, everything. And we can read it now, and very soon we will be able to manipulate it. Genetic engineering is the next big thing. It's the big thing. So we had the Industrial Revolution, the Information Revolution, all getting us to this point. Something like the bootstrap process on a computer. We are now about to change our very selves. That's the next step. In a sense, it's the final step, really. So thinking about this genetic code again, yeah. If you have a genetic disease, we'll make a bespoke alteration. Maybe you want your children to be like you, but you're kind of short. We'll make a bespoke alteration. If you have problems with weight, obesity in the family, we'll customize. It's just a piece of code. Everything in your physical body is in that blueprint, and we can change it. People talk a lot about high IQ being genetic. Well, that's fantastic. Let's all get bumped up. And there's no reason why we can't mix and match traits. You want a Chinese kid with blue eyes, we can do that. A black kid with blonde hair, okay. And if people are so crazy about white, slim, tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, that's fine, great. Free market, we can all have a kid like that. The whole world will be covered in them. You know, even if you're Indian or African, you can have a white, blue-eyed baby. And I wonder how we'd feel about them when we see them on TV starving to death and they look just like us. To what extent would they be our children? Yeah, I don't know. It's just a piece of code. At some point, I would have thought bespoke alterations would be so trivial that every child would be bespoke to some extent. We wouldn't even need to stick with existing characteristics. So, let's see, viruses work because the human and virus DNA program is sufficiently similar. In our program there are these start and stop sequences, and the virus uses these. But we could create totally new start and stop sequences. We'd no longer be susceptible to viruses. Our DNA would then, in certain respects, be totally novel, different to all existing animal or human DNA. You'd have to be very careful if you were doing something like that, but theoretically there's no reason why not. So in 100 years, people will probably have 2 or 3 kids, each totally different, incorporating various characteristics from existing races and probably some totally new code that we've invented. Where does that leave the concept of my tribe, my race? It would obliterate it, wouldn't it? Do you see how the science that started off measuring differences in race is in the end going to totally destroy it? Well, I think that's it from me. Thought I'd share my thoughts on the subject, and I wish you all a good day.